everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of Relationship Advice for Women. This segment we've been doing called Breaking the Silence of Domestic Violence. We have Miss Arielle as our awesome speaker and really just going to share her testimony from narcissistic abuse. Can you share with us where that started from?
Which part of it exactly?
Just where your story was it? Were you married or?
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. So I'm Adrielle. On my website, I go by Mrs. P because that's my last name now. But yes, I had been just dating for so long and couldn't really find a godly man who had the same goals as me. I wanted to save myself for marriage and really honor God. With a marriage, but I was getting close to 30 and it was just date after date after date after date, and nothing was really sticking, a lifelong partner. So I put myself out there on a few of those Christian dating websites, and one of them was Christian Mingle. And I was 29, almost 30 at the time. And I came across this guy who seemed really kind. He seemed to have all the same goals as me, went to church, claimed to follow Jesus, um, agreed with, my goals in life. And I thought, well, he's a few states away. He's in Texas and I'm in California. So let's, give it a shot. Let's get to know each other. And from the beginning, he was very, very attentive. He listened to everything that was important to me. He kind of bounced it back to me and let me know that it was also important to him. And probably within the first week that we started talking over video chat and over the phone, there were flowers at my door. There were plans to fly out and visit me in California right away. And now I see that as something called love bombing, which is a way to really convince you that they're amazing and they're completely invested in getting to know you and treating you right. And that's how it all started.
So as you're speaking and talking about love bombing, it sent me back to a picture of when that same thing happened to me once in the past. And so so how did this relationship continue to, evolve? Did you all y'all got married?
Yeah, so I was looking at it more as, if he's really serious about this and I'm really serious about this, then I'm willing to move halfway across the country and live near him, so that we can start premarital counseling and do all the hard work, right? So within about 5 months of meeting online, I was moving out to his area, knowing nobody, having no support or friends there, but starting to get really involved in his church. I got my own apartment. We started premarital counseling with an elderly couple from his church. And, I just left everything behind, and he convinced me that it was a good idea. And after I was actually there on his turf, in his territory, and I didn't have my family, I didn't have any support, he started to kind of show those red flags of really inappropriate control, trying to get me to get rid of people in my life, get rid of things that were important to me, become his version of who he thought a good Christian wife would be. And we ended up getting engaged and going to premarital counseling with this elderly couple from his church for about 10 months before we actually got married. So there were many, many red flags in that time frame. Even though I was living on my own, I had my own apartment, and we were going through this counseling program to get to know each other better, he was able to convince them that he still loved God, that he had my best interest at heart and everything, while at the same time starting to treat me really horribly and totally neglecting my needs and my concerns. And I just kind of brushed it under the rug because he would give really good apologies and make really good promises. And so I ended up going ahead and marrying him, I think after about 10 or 11 months of counseling, premarital counseling, and living in his area.
So I want to know what happened. Y'all went to premarital counseling for 10, 11 months. And what were the conversations like in there? I'm just surprised that the counselor, they were pastors or just Christian counselors.
It was an elderly couple that were trained in biblical counseling,
Biblical
and
counselor.
they had
What
mentored a lot of other couples.
so what did they say? What was their recommendation?
Uh, the confusing part was that he was an injured military veteran. And so a lot of his behaviors that seemed really angry or raging or things like that, they just chalked it up to his traumatic brain injury. So they said, oh, he must just need different medications, or he must just need more therapy from the military experiences he's been through. Maybe it's just post traumatic stress disorder or PTSD from being in the military. And one really big incident was when we were engaged. It was getting closer, probably 2 or 3 months from when we wanted to get married, and we had adopted a dog from a shelter together. Um, we had put it in the house that he was owning and shut it up for the day while we went out and did some errands with his daughters. And when we came back, we found out it had broken out the windows and gone around the neighborhood and attacked a little dog in the neighborhood. So everybody was upset, obviously. But as soon as we got in the house and we got the dog back, he started shouting and yelling at me that it was all my fault for wanting to get this dog in the first place. And that, how could I do that? How could I be so dumb about that? And all this stuff. And at the time, his daughters were standing there. They were probably like 7 and 4 years old. So I sent them to a bedroom. I said, girls, please go play in your room. And I knew that he was just coming unhinged at that moment, and that it had no rational basis. Like, we had both decided to adopt this dog. I had no control over knowing it was going to get out and try to terrorize the neighborhood or anything. So I just said, I don't understand this. This isn't my fault, but the way he was reacting was so outer limits, like even from his previous actions and behaviors. And so I took the dog and I drove away crying. I took the dog. I gave it to a neighbor who said they would take care of it. And I was crying, apologizing to the dog, saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We can't take care of you, But when I got together with the counselors and him, and I explained how traumatic the whole thing was for me, and I was really, really concerned about going forward with the relationship with him, they said, just take a few days to really pray, really listen to the Lord. They asked him if he was going to apologize, repent, decide to see his error and be different. And after 4 or 5 days, it was my birthday, and he left like a vase of flowers outside my work when I came out that night, and an entire string of birthday scavenger hunt clues for me to go on this birthday scavenger hunt and find all these, great clothing and shoes and hair and all this stuff, and took me to a super nice dinner that night. And when we got together with the counselors, they were like, well, what do you have to say for yourself? And he just profusely apologized to me. He said he should never treat me that way, and he would understand if I didn't want to move forward. And at the time, believing that everyone's a new creation if they're in Christ, that they can truly repent and start fresh, I thought, I have to give that to him, right? I have to give that chance to him. So between the counselors encouraging that kind of mindset and him giving the lip service that he was going to change and he wasn't going to treat me that way anymore, I decided to give him a chance. And we ended up getting married about 4 months after that, I think.
That's so interesting. I recently did an event. It was called Love and Marriage, Beyond the Weddings, a workshop for Beyond the Wedding.
Hmm.
That was one of the things we were talking about, domestic violence. And no matter how much counseling you get, something may not necessarily be God's will. It doesn't matter if you go on counseling for the rest of your life, it won't be
Yeah.
his perfect will. So
Yeah.
I wanted to know, did he actually get that PTSD therapy that they were talking about he should get?
You know, he would do enough of the military and the veteran programs to satisfy whatever requirements. So if a doctor said, I need you to show me that you're doing this or you're trying this medicine, things like that, he would usually do just enough to kind of say, yeah, I'm participating or I'm trying it. But he never really saw anything through. It was just kind of enough to keep up the appearance that he was improving. But I was constantly begging him over the years to get more help, to try different medications, to go to biblical retreats and things like that, and work through the PTSD if that's what it was. But honestly, I think it was really a smokescreen and that he had the choice to treat people right or not. And he just didn't want to. And he was never going to want to do the work, you know?
So, what happened when you ended up getting married? Like, how was the wedding, and when did it really start, just turning from, because was it ever a time of peace? Was there ever a time of joy?
He would give just enough good treatment or just enough affection to make me think that there could be more in the future. So little crumbs, that I would follow, and they would never really lead anywhere. So it would be good for a couple days, and then he would just stop talking to me for a week. Or, the wedding was beautiful because everybody was watching and he had to put on a good show. But on the plane ride to our honeymoon, he was yelling at me and blaming me for who knows what, something like the wrong airline meal, probably. And then I spent the first couple hours in a tropical paradise of our honeymoon just sobbing in the bathtub because I just couldn't believe that somebody could be that cruel if they loved me. So every time I would just take an event like that and pray through it, try to calm down, let it go, move on, give him another chance. Because I had seen him be kind sometimes, I had seen him be thoughtful sometimes. So it had to come back, right? So that first year of marriage was hell. I had thought marriage is hard. People tell you that your first year is going to be hard. And my definition of hard was so flexible because I couldn't really talk to anybody about this. I couldn't really tell them how bad it was. So things like, getting the silent treatment for 1 or 2 weeks until I begged him to reconcile several times. I offered to do whatever he wanted to reconcile. Um, or, we're newlyweds still. We've been married a month or two. And he says, I'm not going to hug you anymore because you expect it. I'm not going to hold your hand anymore because you expect it. And just withhold things like that, refuse to talk to me about issues because he wanted me to feel that punishment. Like it must be me. I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what I can do to make it better. So I'm, throwing myself into learning how to iron his shirts perfectly, make the perfect meals that he wants, slave over laundry until I'm not even sleeping. Whatever it is that I think, oh, he's finally going to be happier. He's finally going to be less stressed. I'm just trying all these things, constantly striving, and that was our first year of marriage. Me trying to figure out how to be this submitted, perfect Christian wife and killing myself over exhausting tasks around the house and learning how to do everything the way he likes. And watching his kids, when they would come visit with us, I was the one who bathed them, cooked for them, brushed their hair, potty trained them, everything. He didn't really do any of that stuff. It was me. So you just ended up with this perpetually exhausted newlywed wife, trying to figure out what she can do to keep him from yelling and blaming and chasing me around the house or just ignoring me completely for weeks and making me feel like the worst wife in the world. So that's kind of how it went, back and forth, back and forth.
Wow. Sir, some of the things you said, silent treatment, um, no affection, and his was on purpose, but I would like to say whether it's on purpose or not.
Mm-hmm.
Ironing perfectly. All of these things you describe, it's so unfortunate that men would even unintentionally will say this is what women are supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that I say. And, you know, like it really sounds like slavery.
It
You
does.
wanted a wife to be your slave, to take care of your children, to do everything according to your will. It was like you wanted to be the god, and you wanted her to be the creation, or you know, and that inferiority complex thing. It's just, this needs to be spoken about, because so many Christian women, and I don't even, I'm not gonna name any,
Yeah.
would just tell you're the one who's supposed to submit.
Yep.
You're the one. But that's not godly behavior, to be overburdened, to be overwhelmed, to not be cared for, to show no affection, and just try to, please your husband. Like, we're supposed to be pleasing God. We're
Yes.
not, like, come on now. We're supposed to be pleasing God with all of our hearts, not just be bending on our knees pleasing our husband. And so I
Yep.
want to know about the silent. What would he be doing? What would he be doing while he's ignoring you for weeks at a time?
Yeah, that's a good question. He had very obsessive hobbies that he would participate in. So um, he might be gone, a lot. Now that I think about it, I really didn't ask him a lot of questions, especially that first year, because I didn't want him to get more mad at me. So I just kind of let him go out, all hours of the night. I didn't really question it. Um, when things would come back smelling like perfume or something, I just got this weird feeling, and I didn't really um, make a big deal about it. I asked our counselor about it, and she said, until he gives you a reason not to trust him, you should trust him. I said, okay. So, but sometimes he would be, hanging out with military buddies, I guess. Sometimes he would be just going out to eat, watching TV. Later in the later years, he got really into things like bars and playing darts and things like that. So he would spend lots and lots of time and lots of money, and tell me he was doing things like study groups for college classes, or hanging out with some of our friends that we had from our church, things like that. But ultimately, the silent treatment was until he felt like he had sufficiently put me in a position to grovel, to beg, to do whatever he wanted. Um, One of the more horrible examples of that, our first year of marriage, especially, I think he hadn't talked to me for like 9 days, and I was sleeping in a spare bedroom um, to stay away from him because he treated me so bad, just like blatantly ignoring and neglecting me, refusing to answer me when I ask him questions or anything like that. So I was in the spare bedroom that night. It was probably like 8 or 9 p.m. I was getting ready to try to go to sleep in the spare bedroom, give him the master bedroom, and I think I texted him to say, like, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to make it right so we can reconcile? And he said, you know what you can do? You can show up at my door naked and blindfolded and not say a word, and let me do whatever I need to do. And I said, okay. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking whatever I need to do to keep the peace, whatever I need to do to reconcile and to keep this relationship, harmonious. So I did what he wanted, and I knocked on the door, and He did his thing, and I cried the whole time. And when he was done, he pushed me out the door so I could go back to my room and go to sleep.
Oh wow. And
And the next day, he was willing to talk to me and break the silent treatment
really?
because I did
So
what he
was
wanted.
he committing adultery during that time?
Later, I found many, many, many Craigslist ads, emails that were extremely dirty and no strings attached kind of messages, solicitations. Um, Things like, meet me at Applebee's on the corner of this highway and this street tonight. Well, I'm taking donations. And he would respond, okay, well, I have $100 donation.
So how far along in the marriage did you find this out?
That was actually when I initiated the separation. I think we had been married 3 years and 9 months, or 4 years. And I was praying that the Lord would show me what to do next. Because at this point, I just wanted a separation. I just wanted to pray and think about what to do. And I think it was about 2 weeks after I separated, that I prayed for the Lord to show me what I should do next. And he allowed me to get into this email account that my ex-husband kept but said he never used. And this was where it was full of all of these things, memberships to BDSM profiles, websites that he had, solicitations from Craigslist for no strings attached, horrible, horrible emails of what he was going to do to the people he was meeting with.
And so y'all weren't really that intimate during your marriage?
No, we were. I mean, like I said, I pretty much did whatever he wanted, thinking that that's what a good wife did. And we got pregnant with my son. I think it was about 2 years or so after we got married. Well, let's see. Yeah, about 2 years. Because he asked that day if he didn't have to use protection or whatever. And I said okay, and that's how we ended up with my son. So when I finally left, my son was 14 months at the
Oh
time.
wow. Mhm. And so you never he never contracted like a sexually transmitted disease?
I did, yeah, I did.
Oh wow.
Mhm.
Wow. And so what how did that happen? Like how did that go?
I'm still not exactly sure. I mean, I think it was about a year after we were married, and they found some cells that were abnormal. And he said, wow, I'm so sorry. It must have been my ex-wife. Because you have to realize I was his third wife. So he said, it must have been from my ex-wife when she was cheating on me. That was his response. And when I talked to her about it later, she said, what? She said, no, I've never had that. I've never had that. I said, okay. But like, I was a virgin when I got married to him. So, you know,
So what did he pass to you?
HPV.
HPV.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, and then
Yeah.
how did that go? Did you just believe him?
Oh, at the time, of course, I had to believe him just to survive, like to stay in the
Yeah.
relationship. So it wasn't until later when the veil was kind of lifted for me when I started learning about narcissistic abuse, and I started learning
Mhm.
that this type of person actually existed. Because,
Mhm.
it's like, how do you go into a relationship like this and fully commit to someone like this? You don't have any idea that these kind of people even exist, that there's such evil out there, that they would treat others not as sacred beings in the image of God, but as objects. You're really just an object for their purposes. So for me to start learning about that, 3.5 years after we got married was a huge shift. Like, I have finally this concept in my mind that it's not it's not that he can't change, it's that he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to change,
He
and he
don't
never
want to.
yeah, he never has any
He don't
plans.
think he needs to.
Mm-mm. It's not going to happen.
And he goes to church, and he actively goes to church.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow. And so what happened when you told the counselors this?
Honestly, we had such close relationship with them. Like I had lived with them a little while before we got married. They were like grandparents to us. They were like second family. And so they truly were close to him. Like they believed hook, line, and sinker all of his good intentions, all of his statements about believing in Jesus, trusting the Bible, wanting to live that way. They believed all of it. So when I came to them and I said, look, like I'm I'm only separating and divorcing because I found like he was unfaithful and he has no interest in treating me the way that Christ wants a husband to treat a wife. Like it's not going to happen. And her response was basically that I was forsaking my vows, that I was giving up on God improving the situation. And
Wow.
I felt
Now that's
horrible.
abuse right there. She
Yeah,
must be
secondary
getting
abuse.
abused.
Yeah,
That's spiritual abuse.
spiritual abuse.
Okay, so spiritual abuse.
Hmm.
And that's what
That's
I was talking about. I didn't want to say no names, but a lot of that is manipulation and witchcraft going on in the church,
mm,
making you feel like God wants this is a sin. You're gonna go to hell if you
hmm
don't stay married. And then it's a biblical reason to get a divorce because of adultery.
yeah,
But a lot
yeah,
of people don't even say it's a biblical reason to get a divorce for abuse. And then you
right,
have a lot of women suffering because they don't want to feel like they failed God.
yep.
And so I was interested in knowing, how did you end up getting in contact with his ex-wife? So we're going back a little bit. Like, did you always have her number, or?
Yeah, she had tried to warn me before we got married. And of course, he had painted her in the light of being crazy, vindictive, whatever. So I didn't listen to her. But when we would go to get the girls, pick them up for visits and things like that, one day she told me, that man is not a Christian. Look at his
Mm,
fruit. Look at his fruit. He is not a Christian. And I said, yeah, whatever. Like, God makes everyone new. They're a new creation in Christ, like he's not the same person you thought he was, kind of a thing. I was very arrogant about it.
mhm.
But I was also protecting my heart, protecting
Yeah.
him,
Mhm,
protecting his reputation was always foremost in my mind. So
mhm.
yeah, I had talked to her a little bit, but when it came time to separate and I reached out to her and everything, that's when um, things started to come to light because I was able to compare his stories with her stories and stuff. So,
So y'all actually got a chance to really talk.
yeah. And I wanted to help her because I feared for the girls. I feared for things that he had done to them that I had
Mm,
probably not protected them from.
And what, if you're able to share, what were some of the things?
Just having seen the level of sexual perversion that he was into after I
Mhm.
found all those emails and those websites that he had been on, it made me go back and second guess. When he would take the 2 or 3 year old into a room and there was just the two of them alone for a long time to spank her or to discipline her, I would get this really weird feeling. Like I would knock on the door after 20 or 30 minutes and be like, "Hey, dinner's almost ready. What's going on?" And then later their mom would tell me he apparently she said he kissed her on the mouth, and the daughter said, "You're not supposed to kiss me like that." And he said, "You're my daughter. I can do whatever I want," kind of a thing. And
Okay.
so putting all those pieces together made me really uncomfortable. It made me like, why were they in the room for so long when he was supposed to be spanking her or punishing her or disciplining her? And it was just quiet for half an hour or whatever. without them coming out? Why didn't I do something more, at that
Mhm.
time?
Right.
So things like that.
Are you still able to see the girls?
It's been over a decade now since we divorced and
Oh,
everything. So they're
okay.
getting older, they're doing their own thing, but no, they live in another state, and I have my whole new life with my new family and everything now.
Okay.
So, but
Okay.
it
How did that separation go?
how did the separation go?
When, as far as the children who you took care of,
Honestly,
like
it
how
was
did that?
kind of cold turkey. It was like um,
Mhm.
we would fly them out for their school vacations from Texas to California and take them to Disneyland, or, take them swimming or take them to the beach, stuff like that. And as soon as I left, we had just had a visit with them actually. And as soon as I left and I told him I was leaving and separating, um, everything just kind of came to a halt. Like I didn't see them at all after that. So it's been kind of hard. But yeah.
Mhm. So did he, when you tried to when you started the separation, did he care?
Yeah, he fought back. I I kind of planned it in a way that I had my most essential things ready, and um, I had been kind of putting a few boxes together of the most important things that I needed. And I told myself, if he doesn't stop following me around to yell at me and blame me for things and call me names, this is the week. This is the week I know that nothing's ever going to change. Nothing's ever going to get better. And when he had started into my son, when he had started into the baby, because he was a year old, um, he had just come back from a Christian men's retreat, which was supposed to treat their PTSD. And his comment to me on the way home from graduation from that retreat was, hey, at least I'm not one of those military guys who comes home from war and chokes out his wife.
Okay. I mean, what
And
made him say that?
yeah. And the following 4 or 5 days, he started again chasing me around the house to yell at me, to blame me for stuff, to call me names. Started the silent treatment again after I told him not to do that.
Mm.
So this time it included my son. And I watched him
Oh.
for 2 days ignore the baby. When the baby tried to say hi to him, when the baby tried to get his attention and talk to him, he's 1 year old and he's starting to ignore the baby to make his point. And I said, no,
Mhm.
he didn't do anything. So I was holding him against my chest, and my ex was about 5 feet away from me. And I said, you you will not treat him this way. He didn't do anything wrong. You don't get
Mhm.
to ignore him, and you don't get to blame him for whatever you're mad at me about. And he started screaming at me and telling me that he was the leader of this house and that he was the boss and that I had to listen to him and he could do whatever the bleep he wanted, raging and screaming at me. And the baby's looking at me like, what's going on? And at that moment, I was like, no, like, I'm going to start getting stuff ready because I don't want him to think this is normal, that this should be his life and that this is how relationships should be. And luckily, my parents only lived about 10 minutes, 15 minutes away. So
Mhm.
that day when he wasn't around and I had the boxes ready and stuff, I put the baby in the car seat and I showed up at my parents' house and I said, I think I need some legal advice. And they said, we think
Mm.
you do too. So that's how that went down.
So that's what you meant when you said started into the baby. He
Yeah.
started being abusive to the babies by giving the baby silent treatment. And so were you talking to your parents while this was going on, telling them?
They didn't know much about it. Honestly, I did a really good job just keeping it all under wraps because I kept thinking if he does improve, I don't want people to have the wrong idea about him.
Oh.
But I had started giving them little tidbits here and there, like, finances are really stressful for us right now when he kind of blames me, or, um, he won't really go to therapy. He won't really work on some of his memory issues or his anger issues. I would let them know like little things like that, but I didn't pour it all out until I officially left him and I came to stay at their house.
Wow. And so that even when, that mindset of not telling people, like that's even what like I learned like when I first like even came to Christ. I would
Mm-hmm.
hear one pastor say, if I'm upset with my wife or me and my wife going through something, you'll never know. And I get that to an extent, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it gives a picture as if nothing's going on with her.
Yep.
Like, so you'll think that the first lady is not suffering at all because she
Yep.
has to put on this, I can't tell anybody. We have to protect our reputation and things like that. And so, um, I wanted to just ask, like, what are your thoughts now on just if something's not right, being silent? Even though you're married, we're supposed to keep it all. And what are your thoughts on that now?
Yeah. I mean, I have something to compare it to now because I do have a healthy marriage
Mhm, mhm,
and it is night and day. So
mhm,
um, he wants he wants to know that I'm his safe place. Like he wants to know that we're best friends, and when we do go through troubles, we are gonna, I guess, protect each other, so to speak. Like we're not going to blab our business to anyone
right.
and everyone. But
Mhm,
I do know that if he, how do I say, if he and I both knew we needed some outside accountability or we needed some people to encourage us and pray for us and maybe give us some guidance, he would want that just as much as I would want that, right? Like
mhm,
we would be on the same page as far as when things are rough enough that we need that outside input. We have trusted people who love God and love us, who we would both want involved in the situation if it was appropriate, you know? And I think that's part of a healthy relationship is yes, you want to keep each other protected and have that trust there that doesn't get broken, but you also know when to draw the line. Like, okay, this
mhm,
is a time that we're both going to agree that it would be beneficial to have other people praying for us and supporting us and
mhm.
speaking into our relationship, you know?
Yeah. And so, yeah, there is some type of balance when it comes to that. I just think a lot of the times it's imbalanced.
Yep.
Um, and so your ex-husband could be considered based on your testimony about him as a pretender.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, because you say he came from he graduated from some men's ministry or he went somewhere and then he came and he said some at least I'm not choking you or something like to that extent. And I'm just surprised that it's surprising, and that's why a lot of people who are not Christians are confused.
Yes.
That's what deter them from God because of people who are pretending.
Yes.
They say they love God, but then they're acting in a way that does not honor God.
Yes.
And so I wanted to say, what do you say to the men who are pretending in church? Like if you just had anything
Right.
to say to them, what is your word?
So I was going to look up this one scripture, and maybe you, I don't know, you're familiar with it, but the thing that when I was leaving and I really needed peace from God that I could divorce, um, I came across this article by a Christian pastor who did marriage counseling, and he writes a newsletter called Covenant Keepers. And one of the scriptures he explores in there is when Paul is talking about um, if if the unbelieving spouse leaves, let them go. You know that passage?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what he explores in that passage is that the way that the original language says it is if they are not pleased to dwell with you, let them
Mm,
go, right?
right.
And this is specifically in reference to unbelievers. So I had to first look at his fruit, look at his life, and say, is he really even a believer?
Mm-hmm.
It's so deceptive for people to just go off their lip service, and they're probably serving on the worship team. They're probably a youth pastor, they're probably doing all the things. They know how to quote the scriptures. So you go, okay, they must really be a believer. They must really be following Jesus. But look over time, look at their patterns and examine their fruit, because we are called to examine fruit, right? Among the church, especially, we're called to look at other believers and say, are they truly helping others? Or are they leading others astray? Are they spending their time and energy on evil, worthless pursuits? Or are they hurting people? Are they doing damage? Or are they actually leading people to Christ, like sowing into others' lives unselfishly? You can tell the difference over time. You can see these patterns and know whether they're a real believer or not. But I had never thought to really sit down and question it. Like, he says he is, he says he wants to, that must be enough. So when I was forced to make this choice of whether to divorce or not, that's the scripture God led me to, was, is he pleased to dwell with you? Heck no, he's not pleased to dwell with you,
Right.
because he spends most of the time with you, yelling at you, calling you names, blaming you for everything under the sun, and telling you how horrible you are. Like, he doesn't want to spend any quality time with you. He wants to abuse you and use you like a slave.
Yeah.
Um, I got to look at this stuff and figure out, no, he's not pleased to dwell with me. Is he even a believer? There's no fruit. There's rotten fruit, but there's no good fruit to show that he's actually using his life to pursue Jesus. And that is what freed me. Like, ultimately, that is what freed me.
Right. And so where is he at in his Christian journey? Well, in his journey now.
Um, Last I heard, his most recent baby mama reached out to me to talk to me about why she wanted to leave and why she was worried about their daughter. And
Wow.
that
So this
makes,
is after you.
yes, it
Yeah.
was,
Okay.
how long after I left? Probably 8 years after I left. She found me on Facebook and she said, I know this is awkward. I'm sorry if you don't want to talk to me, but I kind of want to ask you some questions about him. I said, sure, whatever I can do to help you, like, keep yourself safe, keep your daughter safe, I will do.
Wow.
But that was, let's see, 5 kids from 4 different women.
Was that
Um,
after you?
After me, he got together with her, and she's just thankful that they didn't actually get married, because it's easier for her to get away from him now. He's still
Yeah.
driving her through the courts for custody and everything. So,
Oh, wow. So does he help with your son?
no, he never paid any child support. I couldn't garnish his wages because they were VA disability, and the VA will decide, no, we're not going to give you anything as an apportionment. So
Wow. And
once he had to pay child support and he couldn't spend any time with him, he left the state. So
wow. And so what happened with that information that you gave his ex-wife
mhm.
about what like precautions did she take with her children?
um, she also had her new husband adopt, I believe. He ended up signing away his rights for the girls and for my son, so that our new husbands could adopt,
Wow.
which was a huge answer to prayer. So
Wow. The way he wow.
most narcissists
Wow.
don't do that.
Wow. So your son, so his father is your new husband.
Yeah,
How old is your son now?
he's 10 and a half.
He's 10 and a half.
Yeah,
And so he really just knows your husband as
yeah,
dad.
yeah.
How
He
long have
doesn't.
you been married?
7 years.
Okay. Wow. How did you find your new boo?
I I was single momming it and I was happy. Like I wanted the peace, you know? So we were doing our own thing. I had this little toddler boy and, you know, barely making ends meet, but we were peaceful, which was all I wanted. And I felt like God tapping me on the shoulder, like, hey, you might want to consider marrying again. And I was like, no, I'm fine. But I started reading this author. She has some good groups on Facebook for women going through divorce who are Christians and who have had abusive situations and everything. And she had a small book on dating after divorce. And it was kind of about her journey and her process of how she got back into it after her divorce. Because I was very just like, no, I'll just be a single mom. I'll be fine. You know, that's all I really need to do. But I started reading her story, and her story was one of like learning to trust God again and having a really clear system of how you vet people that are new to your life. So she talked about being willing to use some of these online matchmaking websites and things, but doing it with a lot of prayer and a lot of guidelines. And I thought, well, okay, like if I'm going to make an eHarmony profile, I'm going to do it without paying for it yet. So I'm just going to make my profile, and if I get matched with anybody who seems like they might be suitable, I'll just try to become friends with them on Facebook or something and just see if we can talk, basically, because I don't want to pay for a subscription.
Right.
So I set up this eHarmony profile and I looked at a few of the matches, and this guy was 2 hours away from me and just seemed like super down to earth, straight shooter, livestock manager, like a cowboy, like very just down to earth. And 90% of the people I had been matched with, if I chatted with them a little bit, they would laugh at me when I said I wanted to wait for marriage. Like they would say, oh, no, whatever, you know. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, that's what I'm doing. So 90% were off the table. This guy was 2 hours away from me, and I found him on Facebook. And he teases me about being his stalker to this day. But I sent him a message. I said, hey, we got matched on eHarmony, but I don't want to pay for the subscription. So do you want to just be friends on Facebook? And
Wow.
he was very like, he didn't accept any new friends on Facebook. He didn't talk to people that he didn't already know, right? But he felt like God was saying it's okay. Like it's okay to accept her friend request. It's okay to chat with her. So we chatted a little bit on Facebook Messenger, and then we started chatting on the phone, and we would talk for, 2 hours every day on the phone. And it wasn't about the weather. It was about like, what are your goals in life? What has God shown you is important? What will you accept and not accept? What are the hard things you've been through? Like we got into it and we sorted through the hard stuff. And that was 2 hours a day, every day for weeks.
Wow.
And then he said, you want to meet up for dinner? A week or two after we started talking, I was like, okay. And long story short, everything just, we knew that God had us together. Like we were the person for each other. Everything just clicked. And we started premarital counseling like 8 weeks into talking.
But y'all was playing.
And the counselor was like, if you think you're already going to get married at this point, could you not tell me? Because I don't want to know yet. And we kind of gave each other the side eye, and we're like, okay.
Bro, y'all going to premarital counseling. Ain't nobody finna just do that. Were these the same premarital counselors?
No. This was a pastor that I had known for a while in person from my church, and he did like video chat, virtual counseling with us. So he ended up marrying us actually. But yeah, so then he proposed like 3 months after we met, and we just knew that it was what God wanted, and we got married 8 months after we started talking. So
okay.
he had a son and I had a son, and we both had been in a narcissistic marriage.
Wow. And so y'all been married 7 years. Are y'all done having children?
Yeah, we just got surprised with the little one when I was 42. I didn't really plan on being pregnant at 42. So,
Okay. When you say you just got surprised, so you just had a baby.
yeah, I'm 44 now, so she was born 2
Okay.
years ago. Yeah.
Okay, so you had it. Okay, so y'all did. Okay. Wow. Of course, you didn't plan on it, but
Surprise.
well, I mean, that's a good story. I mean, especially after the end part, anyway. And I know
Mhm.
you're not done yet, but we're wrapping up. I know there was something that you wanted to share, and
Yeah.
I did want to point out, marrying the wrong person, because you said you have to learn to trust God again. And marrying either too soon or marrying the wrong person can cause you to not trust God. And
Mhm.
so that's something that has to be built. But I'm glad that there was a tool out there to help you to trust God. I guess trusting God might have to come from understanding some things. And
Yeah.
when you're able to understand, then that trust can come a lot of the times. And so I just wanted you to, if there were any final words you wanted to share before we ended this.
Yeah. Well, I guess two things. One of them is it it wasn't just learning to trust God again. It was also I got into it in the beginning, I think, because I wasn't trusting him enough, because I was relying on my flesh to tell me, it's time to get married. Your clock's running out. You got to hurry up. And this
Yeah.
must be the right person because I want him to be, kind of a thing. That factored into it too, right? I wasn't really seeking his discernment. I was just kind of running headlong into what I wanted for my life and the way I pictured it. Um, so that caused me to kind of not trust him and just rely on my own timing, more or less. Um, but the other thing I wanted to share is that where he's led me to now is to minister to anybody else who feels alone in this, who doesn't understand it, and needs either education, coping, or how to leave the abuse. I started the website shinefromyourshadows.com, and my goal is to build it into a huge, helpful resource for anyone who needs to leave, needs to understand narcissistic abuse, or needs to cope with it from a Christian faith based perspective. Because you'll have, like you mentioned, you'll have tons of spiritual abuse, you'll have churches and leaders telling
Mm-hmm.
you that you're making it up, or that it's not really abuse, or that it's not grounds for
Mm-hmm.
divorce, or you can't remarry. All those things
Right.
are really toxic messages that honestly drive people away from the church and away from their relationship with God. And I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
see that happen. So, if anyone can visit shinefromyourshadows.com and feel like they're not alone, and there's been others who've gone through it, and they can equip them with the resources and tools that they need to shine again and thrive again, then that's what I'm here for.
Okay, awesome. And I'm going to share, I was trying to make sure I found the website. So shine, but I put shine from the shadows. It's shine from
Shine
your
from your
shadows.
shadows. Yep,
So
that's
here it
it.
is. And here's some, it says you can start here.
Mhm.
Um, it's a blog, a nice blog. And
Thanks.
it has some resources right here, printables and different articles and guides and stuff.
Books you can look up to help you. Yep.
Yeah. And this is her top resource book right here. And I guess you can ask her for some advice, or is this an advice column?
Yep, you can
Okay.
write in questions and I'll
Yeah.
answer them in the advice column. You can
Yeah.
find true survivor stories in there.
Right.
I even started sharing practical tips to get through an abusive situation. So, easy cooking recipes, things to decrease your daily stress in your life, things like that.
That's what I was going to ask you. And I'm glad we brought that up. I wanted to know what were some of the things you were doing, that because I know I asked what was he doing while he was ignoring, but I wanted to know what you were doing. while he
Yeah.
was ignoring you. And I had to learn some of those things too. Like, don't just be sitting there waiting for him to
Mm-mm.
call or to respond. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you can do? Like, if you're really trying, if you really feel God, he hasn't cheated, but
Mhm.
he is just struggling with, this wall. And God is going to break it down, but he needs you to stay because there are situations where God wants people to stay.
Right.
Um, so, what can a woman, a wife, do while she's being ignored?
Yeah. Um, First, I think it's really important not to just be silent, to find a trusted person or people who can speak God's word into your life. They can pray with you. I did have one or two friends, even though I was really, really isolated away from my family and everything. I had one or two friends from our church that would just sit with me and have a cup of tea. And I could talk to them and they could pray with me. I didn't share a lot of details with them, but I did enough that I didn't feel so alone, and they knew it was hard. And then they would pray with me and let me talk to them and, have a cup of tea or coffee with me. So just being able to get out of the house and feel that sisterhood, that camaraderie, and that support was huge.
Mhm.
Another thing I would do is just kind of prayer journal, like get alone in nature or some soothing place in the bathtub or nature or whatever, go for a walk and breathe and talk to God and meditate on scriptures that told me he was there with me and he was taking care of me and he was in the fire with me. I would go like on the elliptical machine in the gym where we lived or something and put on praise music that just pumped me up. That was like, I'm going through the fire, but I'm coming out gold because he's going to refine me and he's not going to waste anything. I would just like pump that into my ears while I
Yeah.
exercise, whatever. Um, Another thing is I would kind of squirrel away money. So if he forgot
Mhm.
loose change or whatever around the house, I
Mhm.
started collecting it so that at times when he was ignoring me or he wouldn't let me get food or anything, I could go and get a burger or,
No,
I
so he would take away money as well.
yeah, he would lock me out if I was past curfew. If
What?
I was supposed to be not spending that much time with a friend and he told me to be back by 9 and I was back by 9:05, then the door might be locked and I would be out on the street that night or whatever.
Wow. So we ain't even gonna get into all of that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Wow. Yeah,
But
there's a lot.
if I saved up quarters and things that he forgot around the house, then I could take the spare keys to his old truck and go stay with a friend that night or go get a burger or something so that I wasn't starving and I had a bed that night. Like I would just prepare things like that to give myself some reprieve and some options.
Wow. And so that's touching on something else. Looking at our time, we don't have much time left, but that's one thing that I always, tell women, have a source of income.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times people who are abusive and they don't even really know it, sometimes because it's just in their bloodline,
Yeah.
it's common, it's normal to them.
Yeah.
That abuse is normal. So what they will do is want to have you in that inferiority position where you have to ask them
Yep.
for permission. They want to have all the money, they want to have all the control. And
Yep.
so are you saying that you didn't even have a job at that point?
At that point, I was in grad school,
Okay.
and he brought in the military disability and everything. So
Okay. And they get
yeah,
a pretty good check from military.
yeah.
Um, so wow. Thank you so much. See, I gotta
Mhm.
listen. If you go on any other podcast, you gotta let me know because I know some different stuff is gonna come out
Yeah,
that
there's a
hasn't
lot.
come out in here. Look, now I want a part two. I want a part two. Well, okay,
Yeah.
tell me one more thing. What's one more thing? One more thing, because I know your child
Oh,
is just napping.
you mean just for coping skills, basically?
Just something else that I didn't. Because let me tell you,
Oh yeah.
I didn't realize, that group I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize people's husband was taking away money for food
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't eat.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. And so you bringing that back to my memory, I just interviewed a woman the other night, and she told me her parents gave her dog food
Mm-hmm.
to eat as as a type of discipline, or make her um they would make her, basically, if she didn't eat her food, all her food, she would have to re-eat it. Like, they would,
Yes.
that's what she had to eat until it
Yes.
was all gone. And so
Yes.
maybe the next meal, it would just be that same thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
she reminded me of, like, kind of think about cereal. If you don't
Yep.
finish all your cereal, it's gonna get icky and
Gross.
mushy, and
Yeah.
then the food starts to spoil. So you
Yeah.
got the child eating spoiled food. And so just something that I may not have thought of, because I
Yeah.
remember you said there are some things you were going to tell us that we didn't know is actually abuse, and we didn't know existed, or people
Um,
were actually doing.
I was gonna say, can you pause it for a second so I can plug in the
Yeah.
computer? Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. So, um,
I
you
was just
what
gonna
was-
share the some other
it was like the example,
yeah,
basically.
other examples. Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't exactly that he would withhold money for food or anything, but if it happened during a time when he was doing the silent treatment or trying to prove a point or punish me for something, then he would just refuse to talk to me or refuse to help me with anything basically. So those were the times when I needed a backup plan basically.
Okay.
Um basically, like you were mentioning in the other example, anything that they can do to exert control over the situation and feel like they're they're the lord, like you were saying earlier, they're the lord of the situation, of the relationship, um, that you need to worship them and you need to do whatever makes them happy and serves their purposes. That's what they will do. That's why things like, okay, he didn't hit me, he didn't beat me up, but what he would do is, randomly spank me really hard when I was trying to focus on something, like I was trying to cook a meal or something. He would just smack my rear end really hard, and I would tell him, please don't do that, I don't like that. And he would do it anyways, just to show he was the boss, he was in charge, and he could take me by surprise and control me any way he wanted to. Or I'd be reading a book, just trying to relax or something, and he would reach over and bite me, like bite my arm,
Hmm.
enough to leave marks or purple bruises on there later. And I would say, why
Okay.
did you do that? You're crazy. And he'd be like, oh, I'm just joking around, whatever. And I remember sending him a photo the next day or two of the bite mark on my wrist and how it was
Hmm.
purple, and saying, see, this isn't okay. And he'd be like, oh, ha ha ha, I didn't mean to do anything like that. Was it real? Did I really bite you that hard? Just things like that. To not, he wasn't beating me up all the time, but he wanted me to psychologically know that he was always watching, that he was always able to do whatever he wanted to do, and that he was in control of everything.
When you were just explaining that to me, and his response to what just came over my mind is he didn't take you serious.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a sign of, you know, abuse, mental abuse, because when you talk to somebody and you already believe they're not on your level,
Yep.
that means you really don't really take a lot of things they say seriously, Jay. Even if a child is trying to express their feelings to
Yep.
you and you just wave them to the side as if they don't have feelings, or if they really can't comprehend, you know, so that not taking a person serious, it just, yeah, we have to learn how to really value. It just showed the value, yeah,
Yeah.
that he put on you.
Yeah. And the more they can cross your boundary lines, whatever you say is important to you or that you will or will not tolerate, if they can cross those and push those boundaries, they prove to themselves that you are theirs You are an object for their purposes.
Right. And thank you so much, Arielle, for uh, giving me that extended time. I'm looking at your website. It's a really good website. It's got a lot of great resources. I believe it's a ministry,
Mhm.
um, she said
Yeah.
earlier. So make sure, what is it called again? Shine from Your Shadows. Make sure y'all go ahead and check that out. It'll be posted in the comments, not the comments, but the description if you are interested in looking for those resources and connecting with her, because I think there is a place where you can connect. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
the
advice forum.
submissions page. Always just go to the submissions page. And if you want to share your story, I can keep you anonymous. Or if you want to ask for advice, I can make blog articles based on that and answer your advice questions.
Absolutely. So thank you all for watching. Remember this, my segments go every other week. So I'm always doing a lot of different segments. So I don't know what's coming up next week. It just depends on what I have already in the schedule lineup. But remember, these special segments are every other. Now it's Wednesday at 8 o'clock p.m. We'll be broadcasting inside the Relationship Advice for Women group. We'll be going on YouTube and LinkedIn and sometimes Twitch. But until next time, bye.